So first of all, I wanted to thank the Somali Student Union for hosting this event and for inviting us. My name is Huda Ahmed, and I'm currently a fourth year at UCSD, and I'm also a member of Ogaden Student Union. And OYSU is an international organization based throughout the world consisting of youth, with the mission of raising awareness about the genocide currently taking place in the Ogaden. And just to give you guys a little bit of background, the Ogaden is located in the most eastern portion of Ethiopia, and it borders Somalia, and the people that predominantly live there are Somali. And that region was illegally transferred to Ethiopia by the British during colonialism. And the reason that I say it was illegally transferred is because when the land was given to Ethiopia, the people living in that region had absolutely no say whatsoever. And so for decades now, the Ogaden region has been the epicenter of conflict. For the past few decades, some of the worst human rights violations in the entire world have been occurring in that region, and it's as if the entire world has forgotten about the Ogaden. Absolutely no one is doing anything for them. And one of the reasons for that is the Ethiopian government has done a phenomenal job of having this media blockade where absolutely no reporters and no information can go in or out of the country. And a perfect example of that is recent events where a few months ago 2 Swedish journalists were arrested in the Ogaden that were trying to report from there, and they're currently sitting in an Ethiopian prison for charges of terrorism. And so there's no way that any information could come out, but fortunately there have been some organizations that have been able to go in there undercover. For instance, Human Rights Watch has recently wrote a book about a few years back that's about 80 pages long, detailing the human rights violations that Ethiopia is currently committing. And also, as you guys saw as you guys were coming in outside, the Ogaden Human Rights Committee came out with a report, and it lists the victims of over 600 names between the year 2004 and 2006. Over 600 people that were executed, tortured, falsely imprisoned, are still in prison without a trial, without any charges, and that have been raped and tortured. And that's just within those 2 years, and those are just the ones that have been reported. And we as human beings, sometimes we have this tendency to, we hear these numbers and we hear, 100 people have been murdered, or 200 have been murdered, or 300 have been murdered, and we become desensitized to these numbers. We begin to dissociate the actual people and the numbers. And hopefully at the end of the event, I want you guys to go through the hallway, and I want you guys to look at each individual name. And I want you guys to remember that each name on there is the name of a person, of an actual human being that's actually suffering through this or has suffered through this. So I want you guys to keep that in mind. In order to help you guys keep that in mind, I want to share something with you that I read in the book that was written by the Human Rights Watch, and the book is called Collective Punishment: War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity in the Ogaden Region. And this book is online. You guys can Google it, PDF file, and you can read it for yourselves. And within the book, it documents some of the strategies and the tactics that the Ethiopian government uses to depopulate the Ogaden region of the Somali people. And as I'm describing this to you guys, I want you to try your best to empathize with these people and really put yourself in their shoes. So basically, what happens is the Ethiopian military comes in to some of the towns and the villages, and they tell the people that they have to move. And when they're telling them to move are basically present-day Japanese internment camps. Is these areas that are completely surrounded by military bases so that they can keep more of a watch on the civilians. And so another thing you have to understand about the Ogaden people is they're mostly pastoralists, and they're herders, and they're farmers. So to them, their land literally means everything. So imagine a military official from Ethiopia coming to you and telling you that you have to leave your home. And their home is literally everything to them. This is the place that they were born, where their parents were born, where generations before them were born. This is the only place that they know. This is their livelihood. Their land is everything to them. And they're told that they have to pack up and leave. Can you imagine that? Being in that position of being told to leave your home, where your grandparents and your grandparents before you have lived. And so those that are brave enough to say what some of you in the audience might say today, which is no, or those that have the bravery to question that and to ask, why do I have to leave? What's done to them is they're taken to the village square, and everybody in the town is brought out, and they're executed on the spot. And some are even hung from trees. And everyone there is watching. So can you imagine that? Can you imagine being in the crowd and watching your mother or your father or your siblings or your neighbors that you've known your entire lives being executed in front of you? And you can't do anything about it. You can't even shout out for them or show any emotion for them, because if you do, you yourself will most likely be jailed or executed as well for showing any sort of sympathy. So you have to stand there emotionless as they're murdered in front of you. And then after that, it gets even worse, because the Ethiopian military wants to send out a message to the people that they're not the ones that are in control. So what they're told is they have to, the corpse there, that they can't even bury them. So the corpse will be left there for days and days and even weeks. So can you imagine yourself every time you open your door and you leave your home, the body of your friend or your neighbor or these people that you've known your whole lives is sitting there in front of you? Every time you step out of your house, the stench of their corpse that's rotting is right there in front of you. There's absolutely nothing that you can do about it. And those that are not murdered, those that are not executed, are either thrown in prison, where they're tortured, left to be dead, and without any charges. Some of the women are raped. And all this is to show the message and instill fear within the people. And so finally they get the message and they leave and they go to wherever it is that they're supposed to go to. And then after that, the Ethiopian military goes back and it burns down these villages. And the book that I'm referring to, you guys can look through it, and they have satellite images of these villages burned to the ground. And those are just the ones that are reported. And many more incidences where are not reported, because like I said, the media cannot even go in there. And then, on top of all that, what they do is they designate that area as a no-go zone, which means that if you're even seen in that area at all, you're shot on the spot, no questions asked. Now, can you imagine that? This is what the people of the Ogaden go through on a daily basis. This is their reality. And I want you guys to keep that in mind when we throw these numbers at you and we say, this many people have been massacred in this town, or this happened to this many people. I want you guys to keep in mind that these are real people, and this is their lives, and this is what they're going through. I want you to think about that throughout the event, and hopefully think about that even after the event is over, when you go home and share this with your family and your friends. And so the first clip that I want to share with you guys is an excerpt from a documentary. It's about 10 minutes long, called The Ignored Genocide. And in it goes into a little bit more detail about the history of the Ogaden, and then it has actual interviews of some of the victims.